Right, greetings. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Terra Prime Live. This is our first episode where we're going to go through the 7 forms of lightsaber combat. We did this before back in our early days, and we decided it's going to, we'll do it again here to rehash, see where everything has kind of come since then. So if you go through our live streaming list, you'll find these kind of down near the beginning there, and we've got one for a lot of these. We'll go through these, and each time we'll have some special guests. Before I introduce the guests, I will introduce the topic. For those of you who may not know what the 7 forms of lightsaber combat are, these are essentially styles of lightsaber combat that have been used variously in canon and outside of canon throughout the history of Star Wars. Around Attack of the Clones, an article was published in Star Wars Insider, I think it was 62 in 2002, which described 7 forms of lightsaber combat, going through kind of what they meant. And it was all in response to essentially Christopher Lee playing Count Dooku and them wanting to give him a new kind of lightsaber style. So that's pretty much, honestly, it shows up in the Jedi Path and in some other things and in some video games and everything like that. But if you want to talk about really the actual content that most of us talk about when we talk about the 7 forms of lightsabers combat, we will have to defer to our first guest, Craig Page. How you doing, sir? Oh, you're still muted.
Oh, hello.
Hello, yes. And yes, the author of the 7 Forms Lightsaber Combat paper, which is on our website, it's on our forum and different places and stuff like that. That's really most of the meat that we've had to go on the as far as the fans. So you will obviously offer lots of good insight. You've been in the community for quite some time. We also have our council member, Ben Judkins. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good, good. And then joining us from the Saber Martial Arts podcast, we have, what is it, Fode? Mark. So we'll do the easy one there. Mark.
My real name is Mark. The last name is ridiculous, but my real name is Mark, and I guess you could call it my fighting name is Fode, but it's not true.
Fode. Okay, Fode.
In the
okay, there we go.
Yeah, Fode. So Fode and Beat are the 2-headed podcast or pod race announcers from episode 1, which I know Craig's a huge fan of the prequels. I'm trolling you.
There you go.
No, so my best friend and I, who started our Saber combat style together, we just go by that because that's how everybody kind of knows us from our personality.
So which one was Greg Proops?
I think he was the one that I am, so Fode. But the whole thing's name is Fodeson Beat Anodu, which is such a fun name to say.
Right. All right. Well, so yes, so here we all are. The topic at hand, the 7 forms of lightsaber combat. Now, this is something when we started back in 2012, this was before they had the Legends started. So it was part of the expanded universe or whatever. But when we came onto the scene, it was the framework that most people were using. I don't know if people are using that framework now, because I know people are coming in from different angles to Star Wars now, and they don't necessarily have to go through that. But there are a lot of us out there that do kind of look at these forms of lightsaber combat as being kind of touchstones. We obviously have set up our system based around them. We'll go into that a little bit as we move on. But basically, there isn't much actual content on the forums presented in any of the media, really. Um, you have video games and stuff like that that have move sets, so you have little combinations of moves that you can use and all of that kind of stuff that are attributed to these different styles and all that, but that has more to do with game mechanics than it does actual martial arts and training mechanics. So really what it comes down to is, when people come to this, is everybody has a different kind of take on the forms. Now, let's start with you, Craig. When you putting your paper together, the when did you give us a little history about that paper and when you came up with it? And
oh boy. So I wrote that paper in over the summer of 2010, 2011, somewhere around there. We're at the 10-year anniversary of it by now. My God. It started. Okay, so for a little bit of background, I was a part of the now defunct lightsaber club called New York Jedi that did lightsaber stage combat shows. One of the members of that club, by the name of General Sun, who has appeared in several of the videos in TPLA, had used his understanding of Shaolin Kung Fu to translate one of the 7 forms into a real-life martial art. And it was functional, teachable, and it matched very closely to the description we've been given in the amount of material given. These are, a lot of people think that these styles were all the fights were, in the movies were built with these styles in mind. Nicolard has gone on record as to say, no, they weren't. So the movies have no relevancy. So we really have only the writing to go with, and General Sun nailed it. For all intents and purposes, nailed it. It will never be 100%. Let's get that out of the way. But during that point, because he did it, everyone else in the burgeoning lightsaber community started doing it to varying degrees of success. And largely watching people just plugging their own martial arts into every single form and then just calling it done did not read to me as being authentic to the spirit of this material we were given. I refer to the 7 forms as Jungian martial arts. You see, you attribute what you want to attribute to it. So no one earth martial art's going to have a one-to-one translation to a singular form. So I started researching each form. Wikipedia is your best friend. And I'm like, okay, what is the history of this thing in universe? What is the history of this thing to us? What martial arts or even storytelling styles mirror each of these forms? What is this trying to tell us? Because during that time, it was right after Attack of the Clones. They were trying to introduce all of these Jedi that were going to inevitably bite it in the next movie. So they wanted to stuff in as much characterization as possible. So we're like, okay, let's give each one of them a martial arts style to, characterize them further, because we only have 2 minutes in the movie to do it. So I tried to use all that information to write down what this could look like and what styles, or at least what aspects of martial arts styles that we have here on Earth best work with that, and try to synthesize something that comes close to it. And I wrote it, I put it out, and even today, I still get people telling me that they've read my paper, which I don't get. But that is the breadth and depth of the history of me in that paper.
I think you're muted, Sifu.
If you are, yes, thank you. If you are in this community for any length of time, you will probably have run across this paper. I know when I was starting out, obviously Wikipedia, but that paper was like one of those things where everything's in one spot. So yeah. So why don't we head over to you, Mark? What, in your estimation, how do you approach the seven forms?
I'm kind of
thought
I'm
process or whatever.
I've been grinning while Craig told his story because I'm kind of familiar with his paper from the opposite like trajectory. So in 2002, when Lightsaber, I was subscribed to this Star Wars fan club called Hyperspace, which was like in the Wild West days of the internet when you had dial-up AOL and you were just trying to look at lightsabers. I just want to look at pictures of lightsabers. And so Fight Saber came out in Star Wars Insider, and I still have that magazine. It's at the top of my like bin of Star Wars magazines and books. And I looked at it, and like at 14 years old, I've been doing martial arts for 12 years at this point. So I was like, I wonder if this is like kendo, right? And I wonder if this is like fencing and rapier, and because like I'd already been into swordplay and stuff like that. Because when you grow up in martial arts, I did Kempo mainly, but we had Chinese martial arts influence, Japanese martial arts influence, Okinawan, and so forth. And my teachers were always like, you just do what you want. You need a safe place to do it. Your parents signed the waiver, paid the bill, and you can hang out here and play with swords. So I started writing down in this Fight Saber article, like on Post-it notes, because I didn't want to damage it. Like, what is this? What is this? And then I started messing around with my buddy Bede, whose real name is Andy. Shout out to him because I know he's going to watch this. And he doesn't know anything about martial arts. So I just found it in my like wheelhouse already to be helping people learn martial arts because of my background. So I just started helping him learn martial arts with a lightsaber. It was like the tool that opened him up to like sparring and stuff like that. And then like a few years later, it's just kind of this thing I did in the closet, so to speak. And then like a few years later, I stumbled on Craig's paper, and I was like, hold on. I'm not alone out here in like Hawaii while the rest of the United States is hanging out on the 4th of July. I'm actually in this bigger thing that people are doing independent, but concurrently with what I'm doing. So what I decided was that my way couldn't be the only way, obviously. My way couldn't be the best way, obviously, but I could contribute in a good way, hopefully. So a few years ago, I got in contact with a gentleman named Steve Kirk from San Diego Sabers. I was teaching a little Facebook video on something about like, I had finished teaching karate class for the night, and I was just playing with swords and stuff. And I just turned on the Facebook camera, and I was like, hey guys, in a Star Wars group, like, you ever want to know what a Jedi might do if they were training on a starship? And I was kneeling down, going through some of the 7 forms, like forms, kata, so to speak, just on my knees. And Steve sent me a message, and he's like, so you're not like totally full of crap, are you? And I was like, I hope not, and really it became now this dialogue of like trying to share things like Craig's paper, TPLA, the channel. Bendu Saber Combat's been a big influence on just all of us as a community. And we started this thing in 2016 called the Saber Martial Arts Foundation, 2016, 2018, which was a bunch of martial arts teachers who were starting to teach saber martial arts outside of the closet. And man, we've been having some fun. But then in 2019, Steve passed away very suddenly. So right before his birthday. And then my second daughter was born the day after him. And then COVID hit us. So we were like trying to rebuild. And then COVID hit, and we were like, oh my gosh, what do we do? So about a year ago, we got together, had a board meeting, and we were like, so we really like playing with lightsabers. We really like hanging out with each other. We really like trying to get in contact with people like yourselves and just share this stuff and try and share that our way is not the only way, or the best way. And here we are. Now we started the podcast with the help of the Rogue Squadron podcast, and we're just in a position where we now have listeners in like 5 or 6 countries, and we're just talking about martial arts and nerd stuff. But the martial arts is the center of that phrase, because we really want people to come out of an education of love what you're doing, not just loving to read the expanded universe books. So you can read Jedi Trial and be like, oh, Kit Fisto's a Shicho master. Yep. But like, what is that supposed to do for you?
Yeah. So we've got basically a couple of different approaches. We took a totally different approach. The tempting way to go about it, and the way that most people have kind of gone about it thus far, has been like, form 1 is this, and form 2 is this, and form 3 is this, and all that kind of stuff. So let's first of all name them for the people who don't know. We've got our form 1, which is Shicho, form 2, which is, we call Makashi, form 3, Soresu, form 4, Ataru, 5, Shen and Gemso. We can talk about that in a moment. And then 6 is Niman, and then 7 is Juyo and Vapad. In the descriptions for these things, so like we were saying, there are different kind of approaches to this. There's the one approach is to look at all of these things as complete and whole martial arts, right? And the other way is to look at them, as kind of a progression, or or something like that. We take a kind of progressive attitude toward it here. So in the TPLA system, our forms are laid out in such a way as to build a foundation. So we have our 4 pillars, which are our first 4 forms. Shicho being the first, and the next show we're going to do is Shicho. For those of you who don't know, who didn't put it together and who don't remember, General Sun is Damon, who is, who you see on the program all the time, who's now, obviously a part of us, and doing stuff with us now. So he will be on we'll do the whole show on Shicho, and Damon will be on that program to kind of go about the first, kernels of the reality of everything. But for us, what we wanted to do is, we know that, because and Ben can jump in here too. When we're from traditional styles, Ben from Wing Chun, and from Mao style Tai Chi, and all kinds of different Chinese martial arts and stuff like that. And one thing that you realize when you get to a certain point is that styles aren't really a thing. They're more of a, styles are what are your training methods, right? So like how you do that, all that. But the actual, when the rubber meets the road, we have a saying in Chinese: there are no styles on the Lei Tai. The Lei Tai is the ring, right? So you say no styles in the ring. So taking it away from even attributing it to styles, obviously we have to base them on something. So, right, I based certain things on things that I know. But the point is that we have Shicho is more of your foundation. So this is your basics, right? And then your Makashi is how you're dealing with a one-to-one person, right? Soresu is how you're going to defend, and Ataru is how you're going to attack, right? Those four things all go together to form your foundation. So we call those our four pillars, right? That's, our, how we set it up in there. No matter how you do it, you want to have those things in there, right? So you have to have your footwork and you have to have this and all that kind of stuff. The difficulty with these forms is that they're fictional. They don't exist. So they will accept anything. So, you can throw anything together and call it Makashi, and who can argue with you?
That's exactly right.
It doesn't work.
If,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I will argue with you,
but
I shouldn't. I will.
But you get down to the nitty gritty. What is it that you're arguing about, right? And so, like, a good example of that is when you're talking about Makashi. Makashi in the thing was attributed to fencing, right? Now, this is what was based on Count Dooku and Christopher Lee, because it was this script note that Lucas had that, oh yeah, he should fight more like a fencer because he was in Three Musketeers and these swashbuckling movies and stuff like that. We should give him something like that. And then when they wrote the article, they said, okay, Makashi will be the fencing form. And that has stuck. And now the moment you bring your blade off the line or do anything like that, that's not Makashi. That's not form.
Which only shows that they've never seen French saber work, where you big looping.
Nor did they ever watch the fights in the movies, because he didn't do
that's
any
exactly
fencing
right.
moves.
Right.
I did a whole video.
If you guys don't mind me bouncing off that, if you don't mind me bouncing off that thought, I think all of the forms in a way kind of came from the characterization of the movies, because the fight saber article kind of came out in this sweet spot right after Attack of the Clones, where like, what's coming next? You know what I mean? And they had just had a movie where they got to work with Christopher Lee. Hayden Christensen doesn't have like a martial arts background, but he's athletic as can be and very coordinated and powerful. You know what I mean? He's like a big, strong guy. And same thing with Ewan McGregor, but in a different way. Athletic, very like, he's got a presence about him, but in a different way, a very defensive sort of like, I will master things with my mind first kind of way. So then it only makes sense that if you're going to generate these forms, that Soresu would go along with that gentleman who's using his mind first, and that Gemso or Shien would go along with this guy who ultimately has the tragic downfall, right? But bases everything off of power and the power to do things he needs or wants.
There's also one other fighter in Attack of the Clones that really
talking about Yoda.
Really helped define a way that people use the lightsaber even now, and which is CGI Fu.
Yeah, exactly.
It is, I am a animated character fighting a human character, and I don't need to work with physics. What are physics? I don't know. I have the Force. And I have seen people try to replicate that to varying degrees of success. And but no, you are right. That is the perfect storm of, differing. It's
like a sandbox of martial arts lore. You know what I mean? You can make up a lot of fun there.
That article, the article is very clearly written based off of the what they saw on the screen, as opposed to
exactly.
In Star Wars, in the Legends and otherwise, there's only one martial art that was actually written, one Star Wars martial art that was written with an actual real Earth martial art in mind, and that's Terraskazi.
Mm-hmm.
It is based primarily off of Silat, a Filipino martial art, which is why during Solo I actually cheered when it gets name dropped, because I'm just like, thank you. All I needed to hear. She didn't use Silat, but I still had a good moment anyway.
And that's something to mention, right? Is that these styles, they're based on their character beats, right? Their storytelling.
Yes, exactly.
They are not actual martial arts. If you read these descriptions,
no,
they actually don't work. They were obviously written by people who do not understand these things, because, like, let's take Suresu. The idea of Suresu is completely defensive. There is no such thing as being completely defensive. I mean, you can't do it. It's just not. It's not possible. By accident, if you're going to survive, you're going to have to. It's like making an omelet without breaking eggs. You can't.
But I think that's actually kind of what makes the metaphor powerful and brilliant. So Russ Reynolds, right, the guy who did this, he's got a PhD in archaeology. He is a smart guy, right? He thinks a lot about the ancient world. What he isn't is a martial artist, right?
But he did consult martial artists, which was wise of him. I didn't say base anything off.
I'm not going to be really impressed with his consulting of martial artists, because what it sounds like is martial arts movies.
It's true.
And here is a little known fact for people outside the martial arts community. You might assume that martial artists would hate martial arts communities and that we would martial arts movies, and we'd rag on them, but we love them. Martial artists are forever trying to insert themselves into martial arts movies, right? And so what Reynolds does is he definitively lays down, hey guys, the Jedi aren't space wizards. The Jedi are space martial artists. And I'm going to give you a faux martial arts history of thousands of years of Jedi history. And that kind of gave all of us martial artists out there a doorway to say, huh?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I can start to insert myself in here. Whereas if, he'd gone a different way with the mythology and they had all been space wizards, and
he was describing elemental magics or something.
Right. And so it's kind of that imperfection, that fact that he's transcribing, kind of Hong Kong kung fu movies, or samurai movies, and he's emphasizing that aspect of Star Wars. That really opened the door for the martial arts community to say, hey, I think I can do a slightly better job of visualizing this.
Yeah, the way I put it is that article is basically like a lay person's view of martial arts, right? But it's a fictional person having a lay person's view of a fictional martial art, right? This is what the people who are hanging out at the cantina think lightsaber combat is about.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, can Jackie Chan beat Jet Li, or is Jet Li going to get beat by Donnie Yen? Definitely. Who's going to beat Scott Adkins? Everybody, if it's those three.
Yeah.
But, that's the argument,
point, right? Like Jet Li. Guess what? None of them are fighters. They're actors.
That's exactly.
Right? They can't fight. They're that's make believe. Right, what you see on the all choreographed, it's all that kind of stuff. They're very physically fit and all that kind of stuff. But no. I mean,
but that's what makes it fun for us martial artists to go. But I know this real life thing that kind of sounds or looks like that. You know what I mean? I'm not going to flip over anybody in a saber fight, but I'm going to use the concept of rotation over a vertical axis, which I know is a real thing. You know what I mean? And the flippy thing, like if you're doing choreography or something like that, go for it. If you're doing a kata, like go for it. If you're into tricking, like go ahead and start making up Ataru katas left and right.
Actually, it's funny you should mention tricking, because a lot of the translations of Ataru I've seen have either been very much following like the Ray Park, I'm going to do a butterfly kick here, and here.
Right.
Or also combining elements of tricking. One translation I saw was someone was using capoeira with saber work.
Right.
I just started making seal noises because I'm like, yes, just start.
Well, Ataru's fun. You mentioned like Yoda and like how ridiculous kind of the perception of Ataru becomes to the layperson because of Yoda, but also because of Qui-Gon Jinn, because they're supposed to be doing the same thing, but not the same thing.
Like,
but then also because of Anakin, because when he grabs two sabers, he's apparently doing Ataru Kai. I don't know. But the point is, like, he's basically doing Filipino martial arts at that point, right? And a little bit of stagecraft. And
no, they're not doing any. They're only doing kendo. Nick Gilliard was very clear about this. He only used
it's
kendo.
true, but he's not doing kendo with those moves. Let's be fair. Those spinnies. It's not happening. But
no, but he just took that.
The
from
point of
Japan.
Ataru.
He didn't. There's no way that he did any research into any of that stuff. There's no way.
Oh, I don't. No. That's not my point. I'm saying as a martial artist like us coming at Ataru, you go, okay, well, if this is supposed to be Ataru, then that sounds a lot like a really, really hyped up Filipino fighter with 2 sticks. Or that sounds a lot like somebody fighting with a case of rapiers, if it's Jarkai. Or if it's, Ataru and you're talking to some, like my friend Keith in Hawaii. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Hawaii Saber Academy, but he's a parkour guy. So he understands Shicho and he understands Ataru very well. You know what I mean? Not because he does flips and wall runs and fights, but he understands exactly where the balls of his feet are at any given time. He understands exactly where his center of gravity is at any given time. And on top of that, he's just kind of like a dude who likes to have fun. So he's going to throw some of those spinny, flippy type of fun things in just because he doesn't care if you tag him, because we're playing with toys at the end of the day.
Which is the thing that in the end, every one of us, one of the things I begin and end my classes with whenever I teach is I begin a class by holding up a lightsaber and saying, "What is this?" Mm-hmm. And I usually accept, the answer. If it's a lightsaber, okay, what is that? Yada, yada, yada. At the end of it, if no one says it, I will add, it's a toy. In the end, it is it is a fictional weapon. I'm going to try and go around to the what we're getting at with Fight Saber, is that we plug a lot of our expectations into a weapon that does not exist. And well, Disney seems to be putting in a good pitch for it with the prototypes that they're putting out, but I'll talk about that later. With Fight Saber, it allowed Fight Saber did something that Star Wars is really good at, and by evidence of the fact that we are still talking about it almost 20 years later, like just the article, let alone the franchise, is that it gives you just enough information to onboard you, and then but leaves everything at an ellipsis that you just fill in the blanks yourself. You are given the illusion of depth. Like you just see, like you are now given this history that is there in the background. And actually it reminds me a little bit of the system that they use to film The Mandalorian, which is that great dome that they have with all, that they just CGI the background in. That's kind of Star Wars in a nutshell, where you see these beautiful vistas that are just projected on the back. And it just allows your mind to go in a direction.
Well, now it's even better. That dome is not even projected. That's an LED wall. Yeah. So that's like there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just like looking at it. So but yeah, I know what you mean. The world building stuff like that. So
beautiful.
And that's what, and that's, I mean, that's we get as nerds and stuff like that, we get wrapped up in these tiny little details, but it's these tiny little details which sell everything. What makes Star Wars different than, what was one of the really crappy sci-fi movies that came out, Space 1999, something like that. What's the difference? What makes Star Wars good, right? Because even if you don't like Star Wars, you can at least say, well, this was competently put together. It's a real movie. It had as a director, it has art direction, all of this other stuff. Whereas this movie looks like it was done in a garage in Burbank.
How is this different than Ice Pirates?
Right, exactly. So it's, so we get into that stuff, and after the time, we tend to make things real. So, we have now our, the things they would always talk about,
Right,
look, martial arts books, so now we have them, right?
Again, that the two-dimensionality that Craig is bringing up of this notion that, there's an image that looks like it has depth, but it's two-dimensional. It's the real genius of it, because it allows you to say, well, what can the 7 forms do for me?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in general, the community has come up with 2 pretty powerful answers, which is, I think, why it has been a metaphor that has lasted so long. In that some people look at the 7 forms and they say, I already have some skills as a Filipino martial artist, or I have some skills as a HEMA guy. And so what the 7 forms does for me is allows me to find a place.
Yes.
Right? I can slot myself into it. I don't have to.
In the same dojo as everybody else. As
what I am. Right, exactly. I'm a HEMA guy, so I say that I am going to be doing, Gemso, and it all seems to work. Right. Or, what the 7 forms can do for you is, you can look at them and say, Reynolds, he kind of implies that everybody should be doing Neiman now, but he has this weird historical progression where, 1 is like metal swords, and then 2 is like dueling, and 3 is like defensive, where he builds in the notion that there is this deep progression through history, through thousands and thousands of, it took them thousands of years to get to Form 3 and to decide they needed to defend themselves.
Right.
So somehow that was
I think
really
if they had
idea, right? But it doesn't matter, because then you can say, all right, well, I, as a martial artist, I want to teach people. Teaching is a progressive system. Hey, this can be a ladder that I can hang a progressive framework on. Right.
Yeah.
And so we have
100%.
One metaphor that is powerful because it can function in many different ways in the same community. Right. It can be a way of centering yourself, of finding a place, or it can be a way of talking about skill acquisition. Right.
Yeah.
And we can do real things with that false 2-dimensional image.
Yes. Now, on that thing, I want to answer a question that's going on the chat here.
Cool.
It's something that has come up. We haven't talked about it yet, but there is an answer to this. I've done another video on this particular thing, and it's talking about the weightless blade. Now, I believe now, according to canon, we can do away with the idea that that lightsaber blades are weightless and they do not perform like real blades, because in Rebels, in the I don't know what episode it was, but it was when Kanan was teaching
third or fourth
Sabine how to
season.
use the Darksaber. She turns it on, goes, it's heavier than I thought, right? And we now know that the blades attract each other, right? So that there is this, you're constantly kind of fighting with it. These forces are going to be analogous to weight. These are the forces that you're going to be having to overcome and to use and to utilize. So they did put that in there, where we do now know that we're not playing with a laser pointer. We're not playing with a flashlight. We are playing with something that has some sort of physics within movement. So that's kind of where if you want to go real canon, that's where you're going to go. If you're not going to go real canon, you're just going to have to make it up in your head to say, well, that's what most people think. Lightsaber blades aren't actually weightless, because I say so.
It's funny, the more rigid polycarbonate though feels more like a sword than any of the less rigid polycarbonate. I'm pretty sure you guys use mid-grade or heavier for most of your training, and definitely for your sparring, because like, again, you want the feel. And honestly, I think sometimes that extra weight makes things safer, because people tend to not want to crush each other's fingers because it's going to get done back to you, kind of thing. But that heavy grade, it has that sort of,
my experience, but
no. Man, you
Not at
need to
all.
find some people who like fingers on hands.
No. I mean, you get
No, I
somebody,
mean, look,
especially beginners, they have zero method of controlling how strong they hit.
well, that's the
You know?
point. You start
So
swinging a really
we use 2
lightweight blade
millimeter
at
blades.
somebody
We
and
use
it
2
starts
millimeter.
whipping.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I've talked to Kyle about the 2 millimeter blades from Key Sabers, and he seems to think it behaves quite a bit like a heavy grade. I've never used them before. I have only used heavy and mid grades. I've used the super lightweight blades for like cosplay, but never to like fight with, because I feel like all that whippiness, it tends to be like, especially in the hands of a beginner, they start going, whoa, whoa. And like, I've seen a 12-year-old break a blade over another 12-year-old's head with a fencing helmet on, and it's still scary to have shards of polycarbonate flying around parents' children's heads, you know what I mean? So when you have that heavier grade, it sort of mimics the gravity that you're describing from the Rebels episode, that gravitational draw to and fro.
Yeah, we used to use heavy grade blades because it would bring the balance point out a little bit more. But we stopped using them because they're just they don't give quite enough, and they bend the exact same amount as the mid grades.
Right. That's true.
Mean, they bend there. It's the mid grades will buckle, you know, whereas the heavy grades will just.
But the super lights will break and shard, and that's where I get scared.
Before anybody gets too upset about that, real swords bend.
Yeah.
Right. Steel
It's
bend.
true.
If you watch any sword fight in slow motion, those blades are going whoa, 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 whoa. Because if they don't, they shatter. So. But
the important distinction between a lightsaber and a real sword is lightsaber is not a real sword.
Great. Exactly.
So that's when you start to go, okay, I need a sense of a happy medium between rigidity, safety, and feel, right? And I think anything above a mid-grade, honestly, for me personally, just feels good. You know, it feels like a lightsaber, or what I think a lightsaber should feel like in a galaxy far away, which is the important thing. It doesn't, you're having to world build this. It's the greatest game of Dungeons and Dragons ever.
I can't believe. So funny enough, one of the that you should mention tabletop gaming. So to preface, I also work with several tabletop companies. I did not work on this one. I did not work on Fantasy Flight put out the recent batch of Star Wars tabletop games. And in one of the books, there were the writings on the 7 forms. And I'm just sitting there going like, this is actually some of the best descriptions of the 7 forms practically that I've ever read. It was just like, yeah, that tracks. But again, it all goes back to what we were saying before, where the 7 forms have been used for characterization and as game mechanics, just to like flesh it out further. It really lends to that. But like one of the things I've been doing lately is I've been kind of doing follow-ups to the original paper and trying to write. I've so far been referring to it as the 7 forms of lightsaber stage combat, where it's been like, how do you tell a story with this form and this form, and you know, basically fleshing out what Fight Saber originally did, and while looking at both media in Star Wars and outside of Star Wars to kind of give the translation. It's sort of, you know, but yeah, it's a really, yeah, again, it all goes back to that weird sense of one article.
I want to jump here, go a little bit off topic here, because I think we lost somebody in the audience here because we're talking about blades.
Right.
So mid-grade or mid-grade blade. We're not gonna don't, that was a term that was used by, I think, Ultra Sabers.
Yes.
Right. And it was mid-grade and heavy grade. And those were the only 2 kinds. Well, now there's 3 kinds. There's 1.5 millimeter, 2 millimeter, and 3 millimeter. Right. And like most people still call them 1.5 millimeter mid-grade, which should really be called light now. right? And then the 2mm is kind
Right.
of mid grade, and then the 3mm is the heavy grade. Just so people are clear, kind of what we're talking about there. But yes. Anyway,
I didn't even think that was it's one of those things where you're like, you forget sometimes what it's like to be a white belt. You're like, you don't even think that people don't know a time when these blades were different, right? Everybody, like, I started on a Force Effects saber with most of this stuff. That's not an any grade blade.
String blades. Well, now string blades are back.
That's true.
But so now we've also got this. So we've got the 7 forms of lightsaber combat. People are approaching them a little bit differently depending on who they are. You know, they're coming to it. They were set up, like you said. It makes perfect sense. It was that one of the main authors of this was an archaeologist, because it does really mirror the evolution, not of martial arts, but more of warfare. Through the history, where you're moving from, kind of infantry based, to that kind of thing. And it's very similar to the way in Chinese history, where you start off with the grand chariot armies in China, and you move into the Han Dynasty with the dueling culture and all of that. And you get, by the time you get to the Song, you have kind of different. Then you get to the Ming, and it's all everything trying to be jumbled back and reconstructed together. China is so old that they did their reconstructive martial arts in the Ming Dynasty. So anyway, so that's essentially if you're coming to this and you're looking into and you see the 7 forms mentioned, that's, this is kind of what we're talking about. Now, we didn't talk about, so we've got our 4 pillars, and when we've kind of talked about these guys right here. These are the easy ones, right? The first 4, right? Shicho, which is your basics. Everybody knows you're going to put something pretty simple and very choppy together, and that will be Shicho. And then if you do Makashi, you're going to do something that's a little bit more like a duel, and that will be good, right? And you get to Suresu, and you do stuff for lots of spinning and blocking and all that stuff, and you're good. And with Ataru, you do stuff with spinning and all that kind of stuff, and you're good. So what do you do when you get the Form 5, right? So what is Form 5? Form 5, if you read all those things, seems like a rehashing of the first 4 forms. Basically like, you're going to do this, 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 and this. So basically the way we put it is you have your 4 pillars, and then you get to your Form 5, and that's your synthesis point. Now you're supposed to take all of these things, and you're supposed to put them together into novel ways, make it your own, come to your own understanding of these things. We always bring up this analogy because a lot of us are musicians, but it's like music, right? You're learning your scales, your chords, your basic composition, right? All of that kind of stuff. You then bring that to bear to create music of your own, right? Or your own interpretation of somebody else's music, whichever type of musician you want to be. And so that's where the Form 5 goes in. Now it has 2 aspects of it, Shen and Gemso. They say there's lots of excuses given to why there's different. I don't even know why the real reason they had 2 of them there. Did anybody know that?
No.
If I had to guess, this is the way I approach it. I don't know if it's true, but it's probably to distinguish between like Anakin versus Vader characterization, because canonically Vader is more leaning towards the Xian side eventually, and Anakin is more leaning towards the Gemso side initially.
I thought it would have been the other way around.
All right, again, it's interpretation, but that's the way I interpreted it.
It depends on how when you're.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Okay,
but I think that's the reason. It's to cut that in half.
Because the point we did Juyo has Vapad as well, because you want to distinguish between Darth Maul and
Mace Windu. Yes.
I'm on record as saying this before. There's even video of it on Terror Prime. Like the last time I think you and I hung out in person, Chad, where I describe Shien as possibly the worst written of the forms.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's literally written originally in Wikipedia and even in Fight Saber, where it is written as
It's like this much.
Yeah, it's like whatever Gemso was clearly the favored child in that writing.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, we just deflect blaster bolts back at people instead of Cerise, where we're just blocking them away.
Exactly.
Like Shien is the one that has had to have a lot of looking at and figuring out, okay, how do we split the difference between these two? It's like Shien and Niman have been actually, the later three have been some of the more esoteric versions, with Gemso being more grounded in, like Ben said, Hema and longsword, broadsword, but yeah, just Shien, man, is and of course everyone equates Shien to the
reverse grip.
The reverse grip style, because the first uses of it was for Force Unleashed, otherwise known as Power Fantasy, the video game. And like, hey, look, we're all in Star Wars. This is Power Fantasy, the franchise.
Yeah.
You can look at Force Unleashed and go, wow. But even, he starts off with the ski grip and then moves on to a regular actual like front grip. But yeah, it's now
there is, I will say this, there does make some sense in the video game sense how he's holding it backwards, right, and walking around, but because he'll do like one strike and then flip it around, right? If you're holding it backwards and you're running through a bunch of hallways, there's one advantage to that: your blade is not blinding you. Right? It's not in your face. You don't have this glowing blade in front of you. So like the hallway doesn't look dark in front of you. So if you're holding it like this, so that actually kind of makes sense in this context of the game. People then take that, and I love it when I still get all kinds of stuff on my reverse grip videos, right? And I can't tell you how many times people say, "Oh yeah, well, what about Ahsoka?" It's like, you mean
it makes people so salty. It gets people so riled up when you start talking about reverse grip. Either way, like fans of The Witcher, they'll be like, "Oh, that reverse grip," and then people who like didn't even watch The Witcher, but maybe they do a little martial arts, they'll be like, "Oh boy, it's going to be a fun conversation."
Everyone wants to be Shintaro Katsu. Everyone wants to be Zatoichi.
But the whole point of those characters, like the whole point of Zatoichi using his sword like that, was that it was that he was, first of all, he was blind, so nobody was expecting anything. Second of all, he was always like really close to them. So it would be like he would like draw it and like cut him in half and then put it right back in. And he kept his sword sheathed most of the time during his fights. He would like take it out just to cut people,
there are historical techniques using reverse grip, longer blades, not just like knives in an ice pick grip, but they're so hyper specialized. And if you're just in it to like fight and spar, you're really handicapping yourself by using that reverse grip in a multitude of situations. But if you're doing it for like, again, a kata, or to explore a theme, or to explore some historical techniques, by all means. But the important thing that I think is that
they exist in forms.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Doing the reverse grip does exist in forms, and most of the reason for that is so that you get used to changing your grip on your sword, right?
It's like coordination drill.
I accidentally draw it and I'm holding it wrong. Right. Oh, I better turn it around.
Or like you said, super close range, right? Where drawing it fully might not be possible or probable. Yeah. But it's more like using the sword as a shield than using the sword as a sword. Or as like a blocking stick, Maybe not super effective.
This wide.
Yeah, it's true. But you got to get it in the way, right? Like, well, I like Shien and I like Gemso. Form 5 is my personal like go-to form. Kenpo karate is very like counter strike focused, very sort of overpower focused. If somebody comes at you with X, you want to come at them with double X, or Y times 3 kind of thing. But Shien is kind of fun too, because it's more like, it's a little more passive, but that reverse grip thing, it just muddies the waters for people. It's kind of a barrier to entry to Form 5 for some people, and really they should just be exploring the concepts of the more passive side of the perseverance idea.
Well, to go with Ben's major thesis during this whole conversation, I have picked Shen as my pet form because there is
okay,
written about it. It's like,
right, yeah,
it's got the biggest open space. I've got carte blanche.
Yeah, you've got a canvas there to paint on,
and voila, there you go. That's enough for everybody. So I, like Ben was saying, like the fact that lots of these things are vague and not nailed down is what is the beauty of it. It gives us these, I mean, seriously, would we have the Mandalorian if it were not for Kenner?
Oh, that's a good point.
Right? If we didn't get to play with Star Wars figures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where would all of this have gone? I mean, because you look at something like the Mandalorian, you look at the Clone Wars, you look at Rebels, and it's like people playing with their Star Wars. I mean, the Clone Wars and Rebels actually looks like Star Wars figures. They look like toys. Yeah. So it's like I mean, I think we've all been primed for this our whole lives.
Yes. It's like when playing with toys doesn't become enough anymore. You got to be the toy now.
Now we do have to finish up the last two here, so let's be quick.
Yeah.
I know we started a little late here, but we'll finish it up. So
yeah, I apologize for that.
Oh no, it's all of
it's that little munchkin behind me.
Yeah,
first dance recital.
Not at all. So so after you pass the synthesis portion in our system, you get to Niman, which we call the harmonization, right? So now you're taking all of these things and you're trying to harmonize them together. You're trying to make them work as well together. In this way, you can see, to your point too, Ben, that essentially the Jedi that we see in the Clone Wars and at the end of the Clone Wars and stuff like that, technically probably should be all doing Niman, right? At that point, and that the different forms are probably little segments within that system. If we assume that it goes along the same trajectory as most martial arts have in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, that's my reading of the article. By the time you get to that time segment, I think it's clear that, people like Qui-Gon are weird, or people like Count Dooku are weird for focusing on Form 2. Right. That is an eccentricity that had to be explained. Everybody does Niman, it's what you do.
Right. Right. Exactly. Like, why would you pick this kind of old thing? And I guess it would be like those certain MMA fighters who are successful, but yet they train in traditional martial arts, right? Because it's
you're not supposed to be both. You're not supposed to be a traditional martial artist that does well in the octagon.
Yeah, no. But that's the thing, you get people who do those things, and people start to equate different things with reality and what's here and what's that. So Niman is usually described as the jack of all trades, master of none. Maybe, but being a jack of all trades is mastering something, and that's mastering versatility and harmonization. Just because you're not the best at any one bit of that, right, doesn't necessarily mean that's, what I mean? Because if you look at it, it's very much like coaching, right? Very few coaches could actually play the game to the level of their players, right? Especially in like football or collegiate athletics, right? Where you're dealing with really young people, right? Who are at the height of their physical ability, and you've got an 83-year-old coach. Well, how does that 83-year-old coach, how did Gabriel, who was in his 80s and 90s when he was teaching me, teach me? It's a totally different skill set, right? It's not of those who can't do teach. It's you have doers, you have teachers, and that's a big thing. Niman would be probably more like the teacher, so where the Jedi are supposed to be going out and kind of fill a whole bunch of roles. There's not one role that's cut out for them, right? So they're going to find themselves in lots of different situations. They'll be on different planets with different terrain, different temperatures, different all of that kind of thing. So I think it makes sense in that narrative sense as far as Niman goes.
Mm-hmm. I think everybody's doing a little Niman all the time. I think you're not going to win many fights if you don't bring all your skills to bear.
Well,
often.
Right. That's something we used to say in the early days, is that there's people say, oh, well, I used a little bit of Makashi. No. You didn't use any of that. Whenever you fight,
right,
you're bringing everything, right? Everything.
Yeah, you're doing everything. Yeah.
And when you get into that situation, you'll find out how little everything actually is.
But this is where you can see the influence of Hong Kong cinema again, where people only fight in distinct, styles, and it gets imprinted into the public.
Exactly.
That this is how it goes down. It really is tiger.
Well, in the UFC, in the early
Yeah.
days of MMA, it was like a judo fighter versus a karateka. It's like, well, really, it's just this guy versus that guy.
Right.
And they're both going to fight their butts off.
Right.
Do whatever they can to win.
And if there's a wrestler or if there's a BJJ guy in there, it's going to be a really boring.
Oh, yeah. He's going to win no matter what.
Because the guy's going to just fall on top of them and they're going to sit there for 3 minutes. Right. And you're going, why am I watching two guys roll around in their underwear? This is before the 30-second rule. They made people stand up to keep.
Yeah.
No. Where it was just like, oh my God. Anyway. So now we've got, that would be Nima. So now we've got Juyo Vapad. And in our system, we go from harmonization to transcendence, right? And I'm bringing in a lot of, because this is a problematic form, because the things that it really talks about doing, if you take it at face value, are all the wrong things to do in a fight, right? Do not get angry. Do not let rage take over. Those are if something like that happens to you, you will lose. I guarantee you. That's what all of martial arts is really there to prepare you for you not to do that. Get used to getting hit. Get used to being tired. Get used to being under somebody's guard, right? Whatever you do, don't panic, because if you panic, it's over, right? So you have this little thing with Juyo. Okay, we're going to let ourselves go and all of that. And so we have this like kind of problematic idea. And so I've kind of I have some experience with some very odd martial arts, Monkey and Drunken, which do that same type of thing. They will purposefully break rules in order to get certain things accomplished, right? A good example of that is in Drunken style, what's called a sacrifice throw, where you basically go to the ground with the person, right? Now, the mitigating factor of that is what you're trying to do is land on them in a certain way in which to cause them grievous bodily harm, right? Yeah. So like you're trying to fall and land on them with your arm across their throat or something like that. Then you can get up and walk away and they're like reeling on the ground. So that's the thing. It's not really breaking a rule of like never falling to the ground, never purposely going down there or anything like that. It is breaking the rule, but it's not really, because there is a plan. There is a reason for it. There is a mitigating factor. And like we said, there's the two aspects. There's the Juyo, which is the Sith, and the Vapad, which is the Jedi or Darth.
Can I
Yeah.
just because I have a lot of opinions about Juyo,
Mhm.
which Chad and Ben have heard before.
Sure.
Geo is, as Chad has mentioned, very much. A lot of people tend to make it the edgelord style. Usually I add a curse word before that, but I'm gonna try and keep it clean. Juyo, like, yeah, everyone focuses like, oh, well, I'm just gonna be, really emotional and aggressive, and I'm gonna, use my fear and my anger and my rage and my No. Because first of all, because everyone attributes Juyo to the Sith. If the Sith were that, they would not have lasted 1,000 years under the rule of two. Like, these are the guys who inflict anger and fear and they ride off of it. You are projecting panic. You cause panic.
Right.
These guys are controlled chaos, or at least the illusion of chaos. I use as an example of Juyo, the fight scene from Sherlock Holmes, the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes. This must not register on an emotional level, where he is taking all of the information that he has and his abilities, measures this guy up, and basically uses what he knows to cause just irrevocable damage.
Yeah.
And on both a physical and a personal level. And I'm like, that is what Juyo is. That
I agree
is,
100%.
as a storytelling method, that is what Juyo should be going for.
Right.
Because it's not, because if it was just like, well, I'm going to get this punk because now I'm now I'm pissed. Sorry, Bronx.
That's okay.
I was just gonna say New York.
It, if I'm going in hot, I've lost.
Yes.
I agree. It's less love it's less love to win, more hate to lose, right? I don't know who said that, but it's brilliant. Don't love to win, hate to lose, right? And your hate and your anger and your anxiety, I guess, could be less about like trying to beat this person and overcome them with it, more about, I don't want to lose today. Like, there's no way I'm losing to you.
Right.
Well, yeah.
And if I have to make you feel bad about yourself to do it, I'm gonna.
Well, I think piggybacking on what you're saying, Craig, like the aspect of, how do you use fear and anxiety and everything like that? It's like, you don't feel it yourself, you project it. Right. In order to do that, you need to have a almost, as I said, transcendent control over that part of you, right? This is all going based on back in the first movie when it was just Star Wars. When I saw it when I was, a little kid, and I saw it, this is what the dark side meant. We had no Sith. We just had Jedi, and we had the dark side. The dark side was just the dark side of power, right? That the Jedi and Jedi powers give you so much. There is this danger of going too far, right? Of taking it beyond. I didn't, back when we started doing this stuff, there were no Sith. It wasn't like there wasn't a bad guy in that way. Vader was just a Jedi who went bad. Who just got corrupted, and so that's why they call him a Jedi and all that kind of stuff through, your Jedi religion and this, that, and the other, so when I'm looking at it, there's also like ethical things. There's certain things that if you were to do these things like you would do them in the Star Wars universe, you would go to jail. You can't plot somebody's demise like that. That's just wrong, but anyway, so how do you create a reality of this? And that's how we've kind of approached it, where it's a transcendent thing. You're now
Yeah.
taking all of this kind of stuff and you're using it for things beyond what it's necessarily used for, right?
Mhm.
Star Sidious, right? He's not getting in everybody's face. He's not bragging, oh, I'm the most powerful, this, that, and the other. No, he's saying real quiet, not letting anybody know what he's doing. And he's just, just poking. That's the essence of it, right? It's not the blah, blah, that part about it. It's all of the stuff that he's doing that nobody realizes, right? Like I loved his characterization in the Clone Wars because they really, really got that line down where he seems like such a caring and I'm so concerned about this, meanwhile everything's being there. So the feigning weakness, right? Don't be so proud that you can't go, oh my God, I'm injured. Oh, I've done this. Because sometimes that can be beneficial to you.
I often use Sidious as a example of Juyo, when taking what you have learned martial arts wise and using it in your everyday life. Because Sidious they've described as having mastered all the forms and yada 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 yada, because they really want to make Ian McDiarmid look like a badass despite being piloted by CGI. But Sidious took what he understood of Juyo and just put it on a galactic level. He was just like, he is the calm in the storm that he has generated. And actually someone in the chat just said a word I wanted to use, and has basically cultivated this, system where of control where no matter what, he has caused damage to the galaxy and is able to just step in and win. Like that is kind of using what you've learned in the dojo and bringing it out into your real life.
What you're told to do as a martial arts student. You're told to use what you learn in class in everyday life. You're told you will start doing that. But there's also this thing where like you're taught how to like really hurt people in big ways. You don't want to do that in everyday life. Like we're talking about the other stuff.
Rock Angel, and I just want to give credit to this because I've been wanting to say it. There is a level of, there's a term for this called Dunmak, which is basically psychological warfare. It is goading the opponent into eliciting a reaction from them that benefits you. And that, if you combine that quality to Juyo, it doesn't make sense for you using it to be out of control yourself. You are, you to the point where you can reasonably assess the person across from you and get to elicit a reaction out of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing. Mock. It's not just simply taunting, right? Because sometimes taunting won't do it, right? Sometimes taunting will only make things worse for you. I always say this to people when people have these, something always comes up, somebody hears that you're a martial artist or something like that, and you're in a bar or something, and they go, what would you do if I did this? Right? And then you say, well, I would pick myself up off the floor, and then I would grab your head and I'd put it against the bar very forcefully several times because I'm not expecting a friend of mine in a bar to go off and hit me in the face.
Right.
Yes. I mean, it's like, what are you doing?
Some idiot friends do that stuff though.
Oh,
Stop doing that
absolutely.
if you're one of those people.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's a good point. That's one of those things. Now we'll get into this next time too, because we're going to be talking about Shicho. Because when we start talking about Shicho in our system, in the TPLA system, every bit of there's a bit of every one of the forms all the way up to 7 in Shicho. right? You just have to know where, where to find them. We'll go through a couple of them, next time, but that's one of the things, right? You start with Shicho. In my mind, you're always going to end with it as well, right?
Mhm.
It's going to come around. And I analogize it to my own training, where when I first started out in Chinese martial arts, I like to do lots of different methods. I loved forms. I loved Daolu, they call it, the solo forms and stuff like that. And I started doing it, and then you get so many of them, and you run out of time to do them. And now you're having to triage your training. You're like, well, I'll do this one, and this one, right? And so you get to the point where you basically expand everything, and then you start to pare it down again, right? And if you want to talk about, kind of like where that goes, yeah, that Juyo is that bridge back to the beginning, right? And it's a very spiritual, I want psychological. It's not a tangible thing. It's not something that can necessarily be taught. It's, you can be guided to it, and all that, the whole cliche of, you can be shown the door, only you can walk through it. But anyway, okay, so let's see. Check see if we have any other questions here that we can answer quickly. Yeah, striking harder and faster, not necessarily going to be winning the day, right? Especially like if you're young, if you're a kid, if you're young and you're getting into a sport, and you're getting into this, yeah, okay, strike fast, strike hard, no mercy, right? That's a game. You got to remember, that's a game, right?
Yeah.
That's the competitive mindset, right?
That's right.
You do not take that competitive mindset off the field. Even when you're in any other sport, when you are practicing with your teammates, you're trying to help everybody get better, work together as a team, right? Let's not confuse the competitive mindset with the training mindset.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, faster, harder, more, all of that kind of thing. That's not.
I think that's common in the Saber community right now. People do use it, like they're groups of people, which it kind of works for some people. You know what I mean? They kind of have found this way to approach their competitions like training, but it's not the same thing as like getting into the dojo, going through your cuts 100, 1,000, 100,000 times, going through your parries and your footwork. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, it's you. You can get a certain way in that. And when I was, I tell this story all the time. I've talked to many fighters who are undefeated until they lost their first match, and then they quit. And it's like, well, that undefeated streak then was pretty much just luck. Because here's the thing, no martial artist wants to tell you this. That's one of the biggest factors in winning a fight. In winning a real fight is luck.
Oh yeah.
What happens? You have no control over it, right? When you get into a physical conflict, it is chaos. Anything can happen. You can trip. Anything can happen. So
yeah.
That's the whole thing. When we're coming at this from this idea of training and preparing ourselves for that aspect, because we know when you get into that space, this stuff all falls away.
Yeah. Sharpening the knife versus cutting the tomato, right?
Yeah, right. Okay, so I think yes. Okay, I think we've got most of the questions done. So good. All right. Well, that was a good conversation. Yes, we went over here a little bit, but that's okay. We will be back next time with the Shicho thing. We'll probably do it either earlier on Sunday for that one for scheduling purposes. So keep an eye out for that. But we will be here with Damon Honeycutt, General Sun himself, to talk about the first form, the basics, everything that that is important in here. If you would ever come to one of my classes, be prepared to do Shicho, because that is all we do in class.
That's right.
Maybe I'm preventing people from coming now, but truth in advertising, believe me,
everything is Shicho. Shicho is everything.
Yeah, Shicho, you get that stuff down. Everything else is child's play. Anyway.
Now that, actually, funny you should mention Shicho. Now that everything is opening up in New York City, I was asked to teach Shicho this week. So yeah, it's like, these have been people doing this for like 10, 20 years now. And they're like, yeah, let's do Craig. What are you doing Thursday? Not much. Teach Shicho. Okay. And it's like you always go back to it. You always go back to the beginning.
Yep. All right. Well, here we are at the end here. I want to thank our panelists. Thank you, Craig, Ben, and Mark, for joining us here. Thank you, everybody out there, for joining us here on the program. We will see you next time. From all us here at Terra Prime, patience, practice, perseverance. Happy sabering.